What is the difference between Frankish versus French? Frankish and French are not the same. The Franks were a Germanic tribe from the Rhine region in modern Germany, Netherlands, and Belgium. They conquered Roman Gaul in the 5th and 6th centuries and gave their name to the country, Francia, which became France. French, however, is a Romance language that developed from Vulgar Latin spoken by the local Gallo-Roman population. The Franks spoke Old Frankish, a Germanic language related to modern Dutch. Their language largely disappeared in the western part of their empire, replaced by the Latin-based language of the conquered people. This video explains the key differences in origins, language, and lasting impact. Like this video if you want more straight facts like this. Subscribe and comment Frankish or French below to show which side surprised you more. Let's get started. Who were these mysterious Franks? The Franks were a powerful confederation of West Germanic tribes originating from the Rhine River region, spanning parts of modern-day Germany, Netherlands, and Belgium. Emerging in the 3rd century, they were not a single unified nation but a loose alliance of warrior groups known for their fierce independence and military prowess. Unlike many other Germanic tribes that faded during the Roman collapse, the Franks expanded systematically and left a permanent mark on European history. These tribes lived in forested territories along the Roman frontier. They organized into small bands skilled in raiding, farming, and combat. Frankish warriors were renowned for their distinctive appearance, including long hair reserved for free men as a symbol of status, and their use of heavy battle axes called franciscas, which they hurled with deadly accuracy. They fought both against and alongside Roman forces, forming alliances that allowed them to gain military experience and territory. By the late 4th and early 5th centuries, the Franks began pushing deeper into Roman Gaul. Their success came from adaptability. They adopted useful Roman practices while maintaining Germanic customs. This pragmatic approach helped them outlast more rigid invaders, like the Vandals or Goths. The Franks divided into 2 main branches: the Salians in the west and the Ripuarians along the Rhine. The Salians proved especially dynamic in westward expansion. The most transformative figure was Clovis I, who ruled from 481 to 511. Clovis unified the Frankish tribes under his leadership through conquest and diplomacy. He defeated rival Germanic kings and Roman remnants, expanding Frankish control over much of northern Gaul. His conversion to Christianity around 496 was a strategic masterstroke. By adopting the faith of the local Gallo-Roman population, Clovis secured the support of the powerful church and Roman aristocracy, smoothing the path for stable rule. This decision distinguished the Franks from other Aryan Christian Germanic tribes and laid foundations for future alliances. Under Clovis and his successors, the Franks created the Merovingian dynasty. Their kingdom blended Germanic law, military organization, and emerging Christian institutions. By the 6th century, they controlled territories from the Pyrenees to the Rhine, establishing the basis for medieval France and influencing much of Western Europe. The Franks numbered perhaps only tens of thousands initially, but exerted influence far beyond their size through effective governance and warfare. Their language, Old Frankish, was Germanic and closely related to ancestors of modern Dutch. Yet, in the western regions, it gradually yielded to local Latin dialects. This linguistic shift highlights their minority status among a larger Gallo-Roman population, even as their political identity endured. Frankish society emphasized loyalty to leaders, legal codes like the Salic law, and agricultural settlement. They integrated Roman infrastructure, roads, and cities while introducing Germanic elements in administration and land ownership. This fusion created a resilient kingdom that survived centuries of upheaval. In essence, the Franks were pragmatic conquerors whose confederation evolved from Rhine warriors into architects of a new European order. Their legacy named an entire country, while their cultural impact reshaped the continent. This foundation set the stage for later Carolingian achievements under Charlemagne. But the early Franks already demonstrated remarkable adaptability and ambition. The Franks achieved one of history's most remarkable takeovers by conquering Roman Gaul with a relatively small force. Emerging from the Rhine frontier, this Germanic confederation exploited the weakening Western Roman Empire in the 5th century. Roman Gaul, once a prosperous province with advanced cities, roads, and administration faced internal decay, economic strain, and repeated invasions. The Franks capitalized on this chaos through targeted campaigns rather than wholesale destruction. Under Clovis I, the Franks moved decisively. Between 486 and 507, Clovis defeated the last Roman ruler in Gaul at Soissons, subdued rival Frankish groups, and crushed the Visigoths at Vouillé. These victories expanded control over northern and central Gaul. Clovis did not rely solely on brute force. He forged strategic alliances with local Gallo-Roman elites and integrated Roman infrastructure into his rule. This pragmatic blend of Germanic military tradition and Roman governance allowed rapid consolidation. Clovis's conversion to Christianity around 496 proved the decisive masterstroke. Baptized by the Bishop of Reims, he aligned with the Orthodox faith of the majority Gallo-Roman population instead of the Arian Christianity practiced by other Germanic tribes. This move won crucial support from the church hierarchy and aristocratic landowners, who provided legitimacy, administrative expertise, and manpower. It prevented widespread resistance and enabled smoother integration of conquered territories. Clovis's successors continued this policy, strengthening the Merovingian kingdom. Surprisingly, the Franks likely comprised only 5 to 10% of the total population in the regions they dominated. Estimates suggest tens of thousands of Frankish settlers amid millions of Gallo-Romans. Despite this minority status, their political and military dominance led to the entire territory being called Francia, land of the Franks, which evolved into the name France. Their legal codes, such as the Salic law, influenced administration, while their elite status shaped social hierarchies. This raises a compelling question. How does a small minority group name an entire nation and establish lasting political identity, yet see its own language largely disappear? The Franks imposed their rule without fully replacing the underlying population or culture. They settled, intermarried, and adapted, allowing Roman institutions and Latin speech to persist in daily life. This dynamic set up a profound linguistic divergence that defined the region's future. The stage was now ready for the striking contrast between the conqueror's Germanic tongue and the emerging Romance language of the conquered. Frankish versus French languages. Why they are completely different. Frankish and French represent two entirely different language families despite sharing a country's name. Old Frankish belonged to the West Germanic branch, closely related to languages spoken by other Rhine tribes. It is the direct ancestor of modern Dutch and parts of Low German. Its vocabulary, grammar, and sound system were typical of Germanic languages, with strong stress on the first syllable and consonant clusters still heard in contemporary Dutch. French, by contrast, is a Romance language that evolved directly from Vulgar Latin, the everyday spoken form used by Roman soldiers, settlers, and the Gallo-Roman population in Gaul. After the Roman withdrawal, this Latin continued developing locally, absorbing some Celtic substrate features while gradually shifting into what linguists call Old French. The core grammar, most everyday words, and sentence structure remained Latin-derived. The contrast is striking. Consider basic terms. The Frankish word for war gave French times guerre, while the Latin root produced words like times paix, times for peace. Frankish contributed times, jardin times, garden, rich times, rich, honte times, shame, and times blue times, blue, along with hundreds of other terms, mostly related to warfare, law, and daily objects. Yet over 80% of modern French vocabulary traces to Latin. Pronunciation also shows Germanic influence. French nasal vowels and certain consonant shifts set it apart from Italian or Spanish, but the foundation stays Romance. This creates the central mind blow. The French people speak the language of those their Frankish ancestors conquered, not the language of the conquerors. The Franks imposed political control but adopted the local tongue for administration, religion, and daily life. Their original Germanic speech survived mainly in the Eastern territories that later became part of the Holy Roman Empire and evolved into German and Dutch. This linguistic reversal was not sudden but unfolded over centuries, becoming clearly visible in written records. The pivotal evidence appears in 842, with texts that reveal how far the two branches had already diverged. This linguistic split reached a historic turning point when the descendants of the Franks could no longer understand each other's speech, captured dramatically in the Strasbourg Oaths. The moment everything changed. Strasbourg Oaths. The Strasbourg Oaths of 842 AD provide the earliest written evidence that the Frankish world had split linguistically. After Charlemagne's death, his empire fragmented among his grandsons, Lothair I, Louis the German, and Charles the Bald. To form an alliance against Lothair, Louis and Charles met at Strasbourg and publicly swore oaths of mutual support. These oaths were recorded in three versions: Latin for the official record, Old High German for Louis's East Frankish followers, and an early form of Romance speech for Charles's West Frankish troops. This Romance version, known as the Oath of Charles the Bald, represents one of the oldest surviving texts in what would become Old French. It differs markedly from both Latin and the Germanic oaths sworn by Louis. The language uses words and grammar rooted in vulgar Latin, with emerging features like simplified noun endings and new verb forms that characterize Romance languages. In contrast, Louis's oath follows typical West Germanic structure and vocabulary. The implications are profound. The grandsons of Charlemagne, direct descendants of the Frankish kings who once spoke a unified Germanic tongue, could no longer understand each other without translation. The East Franks continued developing Germanic speech that evolved into modern German, while the West Franks had fully adopted the Latin-derived language of the Gallo-Roman population. This moment marks the birth of French as a distinct language separate from its Frankish origins. Historians consider the Strasbourg Oaths a linguistic watershed. They demonstrate how political power did not preserve the conqueror's language. Instead, the practical needs of ruling a Latin-speaking majority, combined with intermarriage, administration, and the influence of the Church, drove the shift. Within generations, the elite in Western Francia spoke and wrote in the new Romance tongue, while Germanic elements survived only in scattered vocabulary and pronunciation. This dramatic divergence explains why the political heirs of the Franks became culturally and linguistically separated. The oaths captured a turning point where identity based on conquest gave way to a new reality shaped by the conquered population's speech. This linguistic turning point left behind clear Germanic traces that still shape modern French today, visible in hundreds of everyday words and unique phonetic features that set it apart from other Romance languages. Hidden Germanic DNA in modern French. Modern French carries a hidden Germanic legacy from the Franks that permeates its vocabulary and sound. Although the language is fundamentally Romance, hundreds of Frankish loanwords survived and became fully integrated. These terms often relate to warfare, governance, nature, and daily life. Examples include guerre, war, from Frankish wera, jardin, garden, from gart, riche, reach, from riki, and honteshame, from honitha. Other common words like bleu, bois, bois, choisir, to choose, épervier, sparrowhawk, and garter, to guard, also trace directly to Old Frankish roots. These borrowings enriched French where Latin lacked precise equivalents, especially in military and feudal contexts. This Germanic layer explains why French stands out among Romance languages. It features harsher consonant sounds, a more pronounced stress pattern in older forms, and unique phonetic shifts influenced by Frankish pronunciation habits. Unlike the smoother, vowel-heavy flow of Italian or Spanish, French developed nasal vowels and a tendency to drop final consonants, traits linguists attribute partly to Germanic contact. The Franks' minority rule introduced these elements without replacing the Latin base, creating a hybrid that feels distinct and sometimes weirder to other Romance speakers. A fun way to spot this influence is guessing everyday words. Many speakers are surprised to learn that fauteuil, armchair, flonk, flunk, heros, hero, and even color terms like gris, gray, carry Frankish origins. These words reveal how conquerors left fingerprints on the conquered language while adopting its structure. This enduring lexical and phonetic imprint shows the Franks shaped French identity more subtly than through sheer numbers. Their linguistic DNA persists quietly in modern conversations, bridging the gap between ancient warriors and contemporary France. This subtle Germanic foundation reached its zenith under one towering figure whose empire bridged both worlds and whose legacy is still claimed by France and Germany alike: Charlemagne. Charlemagne, the greatest Frank who became French legend. Charlemagne, or Charles the Great, stands as the most powerful and influential Frankish ruler in history. Crowned king of the Franks in 768, he expanded the kingdom through relentless military campaigns into a vast empire stretching from northern Spain to the Danube River and from the North Sea to central Italy. By 800, Pope Leo III crowned him Holy Roman Emperor in Rome, reviving the imperial title in Western Europe and linking Frankish power with Christian authority. His reign blended Germanic military tradition, Roman administrative systems, and Christian scholarship, sparking the Carolingian Renaissance, a cultural revival of learning, arts, and law across Europe. Charlemagne's empire embodied the height of Frankish achievement, yet both France and Germany later claimed him as a foundational figure. French tradition portrays him as the first great French king, whose deeds laid the groundwork for the French nation. German historiography celebrates him as a Germanic hero who unified much of what became the Holy Roman Empire. This dual legacy reflects the empire's division after his death in 814, which separated the Western Romance-speaking territories from the Eastern Germanic ones. The irony remains striking today. Germans still call France Frankreich, meaning Empire of the Franks, directly honoring the Frankish origins, while the French themselves speak a language far removed from Old Frankish. Charlemagne ruled a realm where his native Germanic tongue coexisted with Latin and emerging Romance dialects, but the Western half's linguistic shift continued unabated. His story illustrates how Frankish political dominance outlived its linguistic roots, creating enduring national myths on both sides of the Rhine. This shared yet divided heritage of Charlemagne underscores broader questions about identity, language, and historical memory that continue to shape Europe in meaningful ways today. Why this history still matters today. The Frankish-French story continues to shape modern identity, language, and politics across Europe. France's very name embodies this complex heritage, reminding us that national identities often emerge from layers of conquest, assimilation, and cultural exchange rather than pure continuity. This history challenges simplistic views of ethnicity and belonging, showing how a Germanic minority could redefine a region without erasing its underlying population. In language politics, the survival of Frankish loanwords in French highlights how conquerors and conquered mutually influence each other. French retains more Germanic elements than other Romance languages, influencing everything from legal terms to everyday speech. This same dynamic appears in English, where the Norman conquest of 1066 brought a second wave of Frankish-derived words through Old French. Terms like war, guard, rich, and garden entered English via this route, creating the distinctive mixed vocabulary that makes English both Germanic and heavily Romance-influenced. These connections reveal deeper ties among European languages and peoples. The Frankish legacy also informs contemporary European unity. Charlemagne's empire is frequently invoked as a symbolic precursor to the European Union, representing shared Christian and administrative traditions that transcend modern borders. Debates over history, identity, and integration, whether in France, Germany, Belgium, or the Netherlands, often reference this period to understand current cultural boundaries and collaborations. This history proves that identities are fluid and built through interaction, not isolation. It offers valuable lessons on how societies adapt and endure through cultural blending. Understanding these enduring connections brings us to the ultimate takeaway that reframes everything we thought we knew about France and its origins. France isn't French in the way most people think. It stands as the ultimate example of conquerors being conquered by culture. A Germanic people named the nation, built its early political framework, and supplied key elements of its identity. Yet they ultimately adopted the language and much of the culture of the people they ruled. The Franks provided the name France. Hundreds of influential words, legal traditions, and dynastic foundations While the Gallo-Roman population supplied the linguistic core that became modern French, this reversal demonstrates how culture, numbers, and daily necessity often outweigh military victory in the long term. The mind-blowing final fact is that this small warrior confederation from the Rhine created a lasting national identity that outlived their own language. Today, millions speak French, a Romance tongue under a Frankish banner, while Germans still call the country Frankreich. This shows national names and identities can endure through profound transformations shaped by assimilation rather than replacement. This history reveals deeper truths about Europe. Identities are rarely pure. They arise from centuries of blending, conquest, and adaptation. It challenges romanticized notions of unbroken national continuity and highlights the complex origins behind familiar names and languages. Understanding the Frankish-French relationship enriches appreciation for how societies evolve and why modern Europe remains interconnected through shared roots. Like if your mind is blown by these hidden layers of history. Subscribe for more straight-to-the-point explorations of overlooked historical truths. Drop your favorite historical plot twist in the comments below, and tell us which country you believe carries the strongest Frankish legacy: France, Germany, or the Netherlands. Your thoughts help shape future content. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in another video. A bientôt.